Pause for a moment, take a breath, feel awe and appreciation for being alive. You're here, present, listening. Welcome to the audio version of Awe Digital Wellness Podcast, where we explore mental health, happiness, and the beautiful, messy, complicated relationship we have with ourselves, other humans, and with technology. Make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app and on our social medias, and more importantly, to visit and reach out to us on our website at awe.digitalwellness.com. Each week, we'll dive into the science, the stories, and the practical strategies that help us thrive, both online and off, because well-being isn't about disconnecting from technology, it's about creating real connections and communicate with communities with open discussions. Even the difficult topics, we will get to it. Let's dive into this week's episode.
Welcome, everyone, to another Awe Digital Wellness Podcast. Today, we have our special guest, Sanjay Anand, who has a very interesting life story and who's recently been heading the Smart Free Children India initiative. So welcome to the podcast, Sanjay. How are you today?
Thank you. Thanks, Christian. I'm doing really well and really honored to be, with you all today to talk about a topic which is very here and now. It's upon us.
And we have, as always, Mark, our co-founder, to join the discussion. And today we're going to focus on screen, youth, and look at a more global perspective. So there's a lot of changes that's been happening in the last few months, this year, in Australia, in South Korea. And then we have the Indian perspective, the North American, European. Let's talk about what are you doing with their screens and why that matters. Mark, do you want to give your opinion on the subject a little bit?
I think, if we're looking at more recent news, especially following the ongoing trial with Meta and Mark Zuckerberg, there's a lot of spotlight on the role that social media and these platforms play just in terms of developmental psychology, just for younger people in the younger generation. Typically, these platforms had so much influence and power that they were able to get by. But this is the first time that we're seeing not a congressional hearing, but an actual trial where they're being put on the stand. So it's very interesting to see what plays out over the next couple of weeks, what the outcome will be. But we're starting to recognize that social media is more than just a bad habit. The way that it has typically been viewed has been in that lens. And now we're starting to take it more seriously and see that these algorithms are engineered by the smartest people in the world who are graduating from Stanford, from Harvard, from a lot of the top universities, being recruited by these platforms with very lucrative salaries to make them as addictive as possible, right? Which keeps kids on there all day long. And more so than just the physical impacts where people talk about bad posture and neck pains, I really think about this in terms of what are the long-term cognitive impacts that this will have on kids, right? We don't even know the answer to that yet. We know that, it's not good for sure. It's not good when they rather spend time on their phones than go out and play or be with their friends or not socialize. Put away the autism correlations that a lot of psychiatrists do talk about when you put a child in front of an iPad and just think about the impact that it's having on teenagers right now. And this is a more than prescient topic, more than ever. And I'm really glad that we get to be here and speak to you about that. Sanjay, have you been following the trial at all with Meta and Mark Zuckerberg? Have you heard anything, any opinions on that?
So first of all, you kind of said it all. I think the problem is upon us. And yes, the Meta trial is an interesting one to watch from a president's perspective as well. I think everyone kind of knows at this point that something is amiss and something needs to be done about it. And I think governments are coming at it one way. Civil society is approaching it a different way. At smartphone-free childhood is one of 45 countries are on that movement. And that's more about activating communities, parents, schools, and civil society groups around not just education, but alarming statistics, disseminating of the statistics that you talked about around the ill effects of smartphones and on children, and then what to do about it, right? The trial in the state is interesting to me. See, I was part of Microsoft when it went through the Department of Justice trial on antitrust rules, laws. And when we were inside, we never quite believed. We thought, it'll come to whatever but then it ended up changing the trajectory of the company. For me, that's hope that, if they're able to get significant wins in terms of thought wins, two things could happen. One is it actually starts to put the brakes on some of the malpractices that are on the trial. And secondly, it helps people wake up that, oh my goodness, there is seriously something wrong because there's a lot of activity around. And then, of course, the whistleblowers are going to come out and speak openly, and they are starting to on how they were in various meetings where this particular question was discussed. What do we do about underage consumer base? Say for them, it's not. They don't think of children, right? They think of the target user base. You address the market, the monetizable portion of that market. It's just counters, right? And then the churn rate among the market. So you reduce the churn rate by keeping people on it, etc. But those debates are happening, and people are coming out even from within those companies and saying, hey, I was in meetings where it was, pushed aside. Or there was I recently read there was one of the employees who came out and said, hey, we kind of knew that we were showing underage content, but we were okay with 10 of them, 10 violations before we did something about it. Well, one too many. If you show a child who's below the maturity level to consume a certain kind of content, it could be violence, it could be of any kind that disturbs the child or that introduces them to something which they ought not to have been introduced at that age, the damage is already done. You can't unsee something. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Sanjay. And I think two important points. You mentioned that unfortunately, some companies or even most companies might see human beings and children as consumers or commodities or numbers, right? So we have to acknowledge that. And, that's a fabric of the system that we live in, the capital system that maximize shareholder value. But it's great that the solution or some of the solutions you're talking about building communities and talking, 45 countries, smartphone free childhood. That's great. And, can you tell the audience a bit how you started this initiative in India and what the other countries are doing?
Australia started out pretty early, almost more than a year ago with, hey, we're going to come out with this ban. And they gave until the end of the year to various social media companies to get their act together. And the whole idea was that below the age of 16, they would have verifiable user age and not have them be on their platforms. And of course, it's going to go into sophistry. It's going to go into discussion. It's going to go into debate. They're buying time. There's lobbying going on, etc. But it got me thinking. And, we were chatting with a bunch of people who live there. And, the jury was out. It's like, oh, would it really succeed? Because it's so that's the first kind of, for me, that's what the first salvo was. And then the second one was a company called Boop, which is based in the US. They came out with this, they have very, very tight device and also a tight walled garden, version of the internet, which is designed to be safe. And they use various technologies and under the covers, etc. And they have their own entire ecosystem all the way from the phone endpoint into the cloud, right? And then I remember reaching out to them and asking them, hey, when do you come to India? And they were like, no, hang on a second. We can't even keep up with demand. There is a lot of demand for this. Parents kind of know. Society knows that something's gone crazy. Then Smart Childhood UK flashed across my radar. And the story is very interesting. So a concerned mother, Daisy Greenville and John Ryrie, they're the founders. She just posted a picture of her children just climbing a tree on Instagram. I know it's ironic. On Instagram and saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if children had this childhood? There's no device and it's just nature and they're having fun and maybe they break a leg, and it went viral. They couldn't keep up with the interest in this topic. They ended up quitting their full-time jobs and dedicating essentially this portion of their lives to helping families keep their children safe from smartphones. And the whole premise is until the age of 14. And they have a lot of research that's been done over the years, which shows that these are the ages, the actual markers where actual maturity for these devices exists, much as alcohol cannot be consumed, should not be consumed, drugs, it's the same category. So they started out and then they, the whole idea is that you put the responsibility compassionately back in the laps of the parents.
Thanks for that story. And, just imagining children playing. I used to climb up trees. I think way too high. When I think about it as an adult, that was really high. It was dangerous, but that was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we need to bring that reality back. I think, it's ironic, as you mentioned, that you're seeing this on Instagram. We're also on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, but we're trying to bring a different message. And it's like, watch this content, but please go out and climb a tree and have fun with your children and with your neighbors, right? People are not talking to their neighbors. Their children are not playing together outside, right? And that's something very concerning. I have some statistics here for the audience. In the US, infants, so 0 to 2 years old, are already seeing more than 1 hour of screen time. Toddlers, more than 2 hours from 2 to 4 years old, already more than 2 hours. And then children from 5 to 8, 3.5 hours of screen time. And then it goes 5.5 hours for preteens and 7 to 9 hours for teens. So that's a lot of screen time and not a lot of times on the trees, right? Which we all want to be. Mark, what do you think those initiatives are kind of telling us, and what can we do about it? We talked about solutions. In the US, Digital Wellness also developed our own solution in ecosystem to have safe environment on the phone. So we have a smarter phone that use the internet, but that has not only parental control, but more so AI that detects, bad context like violent and pornography, but also that does positive thing like telling your kid to go outside to the swimming pool, cook for your parents, read a book, or maybe climb a tree, even though that might be a little bit dangerous. We still need to do a little bit of dangerous play. So Mark, any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm just thinking maybe a counter question for you guys. Does prohibition work? Did it work for alcohol? Does it work for other drugs? Does it take the government saying like, no, you can't have this to really implement changes? I think it's a good first step when you see Australia or Denmark, implementing these bans, but we're already hearing about kids using VPNs or finding some way to circumvent the system, bypass the system. The question is like, what does it take, right? Do you need Big Brother telling you not to do it and say no? Like, I just don't think that approach is really going to work. It's certainly eliminating the drug doesn't make you less of an addict. I think there's a more core element that needs to be addressed here, right? Which is that why are they using the phones in the first place? Well, one, they're really easily accessible, right? It's free. You don't pay anything to look at short form content. The only thing you pay for indirectly is with your attention, which is commoditized. And essentially I think because it's become so common and the barrier to entry is so low that it's just easier than ever to just spend your entire day just scrolling instead of actually going outside. I think the parents perhaps need to be educated on what age it's appropriate to give their kids smartphones. I was talking to a parent the other day and she was telling me, yeah, well, my son, he's 14, he has a phone, he has an iPad. Whenever I take it away, he starts complaining that all the other kids have phones, right? So it's a peer pressure thing, right? And I think it's going to take just a big movement. The new status quo just needs to be kids don't have phones, right? We don't give our kids cigarettes. You have to be legal age, 18. In the ideal world, I think 16, 17 would be a good age to start. Kids on phones at 12 is just way too young.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Governments can come up with large-scale frameworks, ways of thinking about things. Vishen, you talked about legal drinking age at a certain level. And then it informs society, sensitizes society, and kind of gives it agency. That, hey, it's not okay to do it before that age group. I think phones are in that category. People seem to equate phones with screen time, but it's not a screen. It's not a television. It's a dynamic, multi-headed hydra which hides many, many crevices where lots of things can go wrong, and we don't know. Actually, the next generation knows more than we do by definition. So you talked about VPN to circumvent. If you give a puzzle to a child, they have enough ingenuity and I would say rebelliousness in them to go solve it first, to break the rule. So I think this conversation is actually up there, and which is why the method or the approach that smartphone-free childhood has arrived at is actually going to communities and have entire sets of children essentially come into the same agreement. So the parent signs a parent pact. I shall not, as part of this school for my child, I shall not give my child a cell phone or a smartphone device until the age of 14 and restrict social media until the age of 16. So that's one thing that happens. It's an honor system. There is another contract, quote unquote, which facilitates a conversation between the parent and the child, which happens away from the school. It happens at home. And there it's very, very prescriptive. It's like, here is the bedtimes, here are the charging spots, here are places where you get to access resources on the internet. Because the reality is that there is a lot of digital content, which is also it's become, for better or worse, part of the educational fabric, right? The learning fabric. It does lead to learning outcome issues, as you were saying earlier, Mark. Cambridge, in fact, has commissioned a study to inclusively comprehensively look at learning outcomes being dented negatively as a result, since digital classrooms were introduced. Now, it's an inconvenient truth. It's like Al Gore back there with the whole climate thing, right? It's an inconvenient, and it's come true. What Al Gore was pushing us back then to kind of understand is actually, it's come to pass. It's happened. So anyway, it's one of those, it's an inconvenient thing, right? Now, how do we go back and say all the digital transformation and all of the ed tech that's happening around us is actually making children dumber in some senses, removed from true learning, killing their curiosity, making them lazy, whatever it is, right? Reading has gone through the floor. It's hard. So parents have to recognize that, oh my goodness, let's save the next generation. That's what we are thinking. You go up to the ones in grade 5 and 6 and say, hey, parents, this is coming up in a couple of years. All of the peer group, the most likely peer group of the child, is going to be in on this plan. Nobody is going to have a phone. And then it puts immediate pressure on, okay, so if it's not the phone, then how do you engage the child? Parents are as much addicted to this. They are as culpable as the tech companies in this. Passionately, we have to be very compassionate. You cannot go look at a parent and say you're a bad parent. That's just not going to do it. No. It's very tricky. So they managed to do it. They have around 200,000 petitions, 300,000 petitions in the UK went out to the government. Of course, the bill is making its way through the houses in the UK. The 5 families who initiated this have actually lost their children. Why did it have to go there for the government to stand up and sit up and take notice and say, oh my goodness, this could take lives?
What is the bill exactly that's trying to be passed in the UK right now?
It's the same. Social media up to the age of 16.
Okay.
No social media up to the age of 16. And parental controls don't work. You're very right. It has to be a much, much bigger realization and movement. And with AI, what's to say, right? So OpenAI recently said, hey, we're going to have an erotic companion. Like, excuse me, like you're like normalizing. Yeah. I mean, what are we doing, right? And don't worry about it. We'll do age verification. Well, they don't know how to do it. And they will not do it. And it has other implications. Try to verify someone, then they are not private on the internet. So you're violating their privacy. One of the things about the internet is anonymity and safety. It's a founding principle of the internet.
Well, we'll think about the effects it's going to have on the dating market, right? If all the guys just go to their erotic companion and they're just like, screw women, I'm just going to go to my ChatGPT girlfriend and spend the evening with her. And I think it's, there was this comedian who was talking about like sex robots, and then just like, we're going to get to a point where we just don't need each other anymore. And essentially that's what people are doing, right? When they use AI, they're just outsourcing any sort of critical thinking. And that's the damage. I think that's the damage that the Cambridge studies suggest, is that don't let kids use AI because they're actually outsourcing thinking to the AI, which is inhibiting them from actually learning.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to, an important point about we're working with families, we're working with schools, and, maybe AI is making me look like a fool or being a fool. But in all seriousness, we are, talking about, who's to blame, right? And it's not about that. It's about compassion, like you mentioned, Sanjay. Yeah. And I love that, because it's like the parents are also involved. The parents don't know. They haven't been told. They've been told it's safe. Yes, just do this. It's okay. But now they kind of cannot hide that it's not a good thing to give that to their kids. And yes, we live in a world where they probably need to have a phone or some communication, but what and how, right? And they don't know how, and they're having family conflicts at home, right? Mark, you've seen the parents as well. I can't have a conversation with my son, with my daughter. They don't want to talk to me. It's conflict. It's screaming. They don't want to come to dinner. They're on their phone. They're gaming. They're doing things like that, right? And oh, by the way, the mom and dad are also probably on their phone. And you talked about people cannot read anymore, right? A lot of parents, okay, well, I would love my kids to read more. Like every teacher I talk to, 5-10 years, the kids cannot read. The attention is bad. They cannot read a book. They cannot, they can maybe read an X or Twitter tweet. They maybe read a caption, a whole poem, probably not, right? So I think, Mark, you're saying some kids cannot watch a full movie anymore.
Yes, it's what the parent the other night said to me. She said, like, my son just can't sit through a movie anymore. They just accept that this is the reality, right? This is the people don't watch movies anymore. Like, that's just not what we do anymore. It's like our attention. Yeah.
And to give like one more comment, and is that if you want your kids to read, model it. You pick up a book and you read with your kid. Hey, it's not screen time, it's reading time. Let's all pick a book that we like and read that. But it's like, should I read? Parents forgot how to read themselves. And again, it's not to blame, it's to give compassion, but to say we can go back to reading books in family, maybe under a tree where children are climbing, right? We can do that. This is possible. It's not the utopia. We've done it for so long, and now we think that we cannot anymore, but that's not true.
Yeah, I think we touched upon a number of these, which show up in conversations, by the way. When we are in conversations with parents or teacher groups, these questions come up. And the parents are the first ones to ask, oh, how do I put limits on my own usage of the phone? Or how do I get sense for which app I'm in longest? The reality is they're all there. But technology, they're going to hide it. They're not going to make it easy for you to find them or to monitor yourself. But that being said, I think reading starts started to fall even before that with the advent, with the rise of the television. And also, I would say with COVID, a lot of things went crazy. We just went behind screens because that was the safest place to be. And then we never quite came out of those boxes.
And then we realized that the screens are not so safe for children or adults, actually, right?
Absolutely, for other reasons. So one of the things is, okay, so if it's not the phone, then what is it, right? And parents alone cannot switch they cannot turn it on one day and say, hey, hang on a second, we're going to be a nature-loving, walk-taking, reading family. It doesn't happen overnight. That's where the rest of the community comes in. So schools are a good ecosystem to enable that, right? And many schools, by the way, there's some glimmer of hope as well. I think educators, by and large, recognize it to varying degrees, are starting to move the needle across the world. We are on these groups, again, ironic, we are on WhatsApp groups with 45 other, country representatives, and best practices fly around. There are around 12 countries, by the way, that are grappling with the issue of age limits for access. There are companies in the world which, much like the one I mentioned earlier, there are smart watch companies, which is because there are sub-scenarios. Like if my child is out for after-school activities or they've gone into a play date, I need to be able to, be able to access them. They need to be able to call me. The world has become a more dangerous place. Smart watches start to come into play, right? And they do very limited things. You can do a text-like message. You can essentially receive a call, send a call, and that's that. No messaging and no app ecosystem. See, the thing is, the smartphone is smart because it is a dynamic device with an app ecosystem. So all of a sudden, you started with only one app, which is call mom when I'm, missing her. And all of a sudden it became call my friends and then, call the AI agent, right? So all of that is happening, and that's just calling. And then now it's chatting, and now it's, sharing. The other thing is desktops. So desktops, so we say, okay, fine, a certain subset of dumb phones. I tried to buy a Nokia phone. It used to be the hottest thing on the planet when it first came out. I could not use it, guys. I could not use it. And I reported back and just like, never mind. Just take it out of the slides. That's just not going to happen. The Nokia, whatever series, dead in the water. But the smartwatch was reasonable, right? So there are modern devices coming out. Many of them are made in India as well. India has its own ecosystem of smartwatches, not the ones connected to phones, etc. There's that. But then there's also this question of, there's homework. Everything is flying digitally. Many schools have a laptop policy. They allow laptops to come in. And then they have these complex, VPNs that purport to, keep them safe. But then the VPN also allows you to pop out and be somebody else on the internet. So children are smart. And then there's a gaming ecosystem. Guess what? I mean, the monster just keeps, it's like the Hydra. So the gaming ecosystem is Roblox. And Roblox is turning out to be a place where, initially it was like, yeah, let's build a few things too. You can buy and trade. There's a kind of a gambling kind of a tilt to it. There is avatars, anonymous people masquerading as whatever. And all of a sudden, you're talking to a monster. You're playing with a monster.
Yeah, Roblox is very popular for the younger kids, right? All over the world. And Mark, can you share a bit about, the smarter phone? We talked about the smart watch that one of the solutions.
Yeah, well, I mean, sort of similar to what you were saying before, Sanjay, is that like you can take the phone away from the child and tell them to go read a book, go to the gym. It's not going to be very effective. They'll get very resentful and frustrated with you. What we try to do with this device that we've developed called the smarter phone is that instead of just blocking websites, we try to incentivize behavior that will reward kids with more screen time. So let's say that a kid wants to go on TikTok for 15 minutes. Well, in order to unlock 15 minutes of screen time with this phone, they have to go on a walk. How does the phone know that you went on a walk? Well, maybe it doesn't know that you're going on a walk specifically, but it knows when it's not being moved, touched, interacted with. So the phone will prompt you to lie down on a flat surface. And you do that and it says, leave this here for 30 minutes. So what are you going to do for 30 minutes? Are you just going to sit and stare at a wall? Some kids can do that, but most can't. So they're going to be incentivized to go out into the world and explore and do something, go for a walk, go to the gym, just spend their time differently. So those subtle shifts is what we're really trying to incentivize with this device. It's not that you have to strictly go for a walk necessarily, but it's that we're trying to implement behavior change by incentivizing you to do something, because because there is a reward in finishing a book instead of just looking at a 30-second clip or a 10-second clip on TikTok.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. And there is some geolocalization on the phone so that it can track a little bit about the walk, or if you're going to the library or to the neighboring swimming pool, so that, it's the phone, not just an app. You talked about the ecosystem, right? A lot of people ask us, why did you guys not make an app? Well, the app is controlled by the App Store, which is either, one Google or one Apple, and they don't want you to track everything. Yeah, we're working with Samsung to be able to work directly on the device so that we can control every app that's used or not used. We can track and we can show, we have some RCT studies that this phone is effective to reducing screen time for at least 40%. It is medically approved in Europe, and we're trying to also get that in other jurisdictions. So yeah, that's one of the ways that we try to use technology for good and for some of those things. Ideally, if you didn't have a cell phone, probably be better. But if you have the peer pressure or you want to have geolocalization of your child, you can have this phone and also reduce the risk and reduce the screen time, right? If we go to talk a little bit about, internationally, we talked about Europe, India. I have some statistics here from South Korea. So do you think that South Korea's phone use is high or low? It is very high. It is one of the highest. So nearly all teens or adolescents in South Korea, 99.1, have a smartphone. So that is quite scary. And guess what, guys? South Korea has the #1 rate in the world for suicide. I'm not sure if that's linked or not, but I know there's other factors. But, depressive symptom, a lot of issues. We've heard of South Korean gamers. We talked about gaming that also committed suicide. So it's a real crisis, and the government in South Korea is actively trying to look at that.
And on a side note, I'm not sure how related it is, but the lowest birth rate in the world. It actually is projected to have population collapse within the next 100 years because they've reached a point where they're our level, so the reproductive level, they have around 1.4 people for every 2 people they have. So it's not enough to sustain. So South Korea has like an internal joke about having the lowest population, or not, lowest birth rate in the world. Maybe it's correlated to smartphone usage. Who knows? Maybe it could be correlated to a number of other factors. People placing more emphasis on the career, dating less. People having smartphones could be somewhat related, though.
Thanks for your insight, Mark. Nearly 43% of South Korean aged 10 to 19 are classified as overly dependent on smartphone in 2024. So that was even a few years back, and already 43% classified as overly dependent, right? So this is really affecting the fabric of the population. And we love, K-pop and K-drama, and maybe that's all they're watching. But, there is other ways to communicate and to, especially as at the teen, you're supposed to develop social skills, right? And maybe go date and have children later if your country needs it or the world needs it. So those are kind of alarming statistics. It is the highest penetration rate on the planet. It's South Korea. And, on the flip side, let's see what's going good in the world. Japan is the lowest, right? So they're actually, similar culture, although they're quite different. And really next to each other, there's a ferry you can take from Japan to South Korea. So why is South Korea so high? And well, maybe North Korea is the lowest, but we don't know about that. We don't have that stat. So Japan is, currently with the least screen time. So it is less than 5 hours daily screen time for everyone. The rest is closer to 9. And there's a few reasons for it. Yes, there is a high-tech culture. So both Korea and Japan have a high technology. So they're using technology. But, Facebook has not really, and Meta has not really penetrated the Japanese market. They have their own communication. I've had Line on my phone. I've been to Japan a few times, and it's in other countries. So they're using mostly Line. And Line is a bit like Facebook Messenger, but more like WhatsApp, more like Signal. What we've learned from studies is that if you're communicating one-to-one or in a group chat, like you'd mentioned your WhatsApp group chat, this is still healthy communication because you're talking, you can leave voicemail, voice message, and you're talking directly to people, messaging, not scrolling, doom scrolling, losing your attention, getting the algorithm to tell you what to do. So, and there's, some great advance in Japan that, people are still doing picnics. I've been to, in May, they have the cherry blossom. People are more connected to nature. They're less in their cell phone. So we can learn from Japan, and also what not to do in South Korea, guys.
I believe in South Korea, the government is trying to come down really hard on regulation. They recognized it. So maybe that's the tipping point. Japan seems like a very interesting one. I'll have to go look at that carefully. But if you look at a lot of the South American side, it's very similar. Brazil, penetration rates. India as well. China, it's difficult to tell. And they have their own ecosystem, which is equally, addictive and so on.
Yeah, the WeChat in China is everything, and
Right.
it knows you more than your mother.
And also it's how societies are structured. So I can tell you in India, one of the things that we are running into is India is a very tech forward culture. We think of technology as the leapfrog, that one missing element that enables you to leapfrog your generational, class, economic or well-being class. We also look at the government is very pro technology. OpenAI has one of its largest experiments running in India, and I call them experiments. They're not product because they are the attention economy and they're learning, and tuning their algorithms based on usage. India is one of the largest ones for OpenAI. Then the government thinks of that as a positive because it's our way of perhaps leapfrogging, China. So each country comes with its own, kind of.
What is the nature of this experiment that OpenAI is running in India? What are they doing exactly?
Well, their versions are free and they're bundled with one of the two. Our telecom fabric is just a duopoly, and both of them bundled. OpenAI is just there. I mean, go into one of your browsers and try turning off AI.
Well, we also know recently in the news that OpenAI have signed a contract with the Department of War in the U.S. after Anthropic was not happy of the use of their AI for killing people, as the Department of War does. So yeah, it's interesting to see that people's safety, children's safety are not some of the priorities of some of those companies, unfortunately.
Yeah, because see, again, coming back to this, right? So children are the next user base. It's as simple as that, right? It's like the vaping, movement, right? So they kind of went lower in age by saying that it's not tobacco, it's the other thing. But then suddenly they started finding traces of, THC and so on, right? So, oh my goodness, here we were trying to not have them smoke a cigarette, tobacco perhaps, and now they are on THC 2 years before they were supposed to be, right? So companies will try these things, and that's just the nature of capitalism.
Well, let me ask a question, Sanjay. Like the overwhelming majority of the revenue model for these platforms, especially Meta, is ad revenue, correct? So it's coming from advertisers. It's not coming from children. Why not just say like, okay, most of the money is coming from these advertisers. Like we're okay to just like ban kids from the platform. Like what is the incentive for them to just try to keep having the kids on the platform?
It's eyeballs, it's dwell time, it's engagement. So engagement is the core goal. It's like we need to keep our users engaged. And the engagement under the covers breaks down into dwell time, how long you stay on a page. That gives them a signal. It's like, maybe this person is interested in, this topic. And then all of a sudden your feed is, kind of filled with that. It's number of scrolls.
Sorry to interrupt. How does engagement translate to revenue though from the kids? Is it that the kids are clicking on ads and purchasing items? That's how the revenue model is being distributed amongst the children? How is it engagement and scrolling? I understand those metrics, but.
Very good question. You'll be surprised to find out that the advertising business runs on promises of engagement. There's no need for a click. So the click-through is a stronger signal, but just the fact that it showed up on the screen and they stayed a bit longer, they can measure that, they can send it back into the ad, and the advertisers pay for that, right? So every user which is in front of the screen, who is in front of the screen, to them, the billboard has essentially had an impression. Whether they even saw the ad, dwelled on the ad, or clicked on the ad is secondary. The metrics are RPM, the number of rolls per million clicks. So the advertisers are very much in on it. To the advertiser, the age of the user is not even an interesting thing until they start to target. Like the fact that A number of users spent M number of minutes going through S number of screens over a period of time T, and then they have these complex equations. As you said, the smartest ones are working on these algorithms on the backing, and they're able to figure out attribute platform usage, and then the advertisers are more than willing to pay that money. That's just on that platform. Now each of these signals also gets fed intent into other platforms, right? You're looking for a particular product, trying to shop for a particular product, Amazon gets to know about it.
And then they share the data with Amazon. So
there's a whole ecosystem. An economic essentially engine that's running behind the covers, which is sharing this information without even asking you, actually, without consent. And even the WhatsApp chats, unless you turn up the privacy settings, the things that you are coming to your friends, they are listening, and all of a sudden you'll see ads popping up for those in other platforms, on Netflix, Spotify.
Thanks for sharing. And for the sake of the audience, Sanjay has been for many years an executive at Google, at Microsoft. So he knows a lot about tech. And thanks for explaining and, a little bit exposing what goes on beyond the doors of those big boardrooms and high level decisions. And I didn't hear in your speech someone say, I'm caring about a children or an adult as a human being. It's more like, let's treat that as, ad revenue, as a disposable, as a potential customers, as you mentioned, right? So the ad goes into the brain of an 8 years old, and then they're more prone to buy stuff later on in their life or to ask their parents about that, right? So this is what we're dealing with. And again, let's be compassionate with the employers and the company that also try to make a living. But I think we can have a better understanding, clarity, transparency, and action based on the knowledge that we know that it is harming our kids. It is harming children across the world. We talked about, different regions. South America, Brazil is the highest in terms of youth. So, Brazil, almost 200 million people, a lot of issues with youth and adults over there. In Africa, South Africa is the biggest, one of the biggest consumer of smartphone and screen time in Africa and the world. So region by region, globally, we're seeing that those interesting, fun algorithm, maybe even AI girlfriends or whatever friends we want to call them, are kind of intriguing or collective curiosity. And then we're stuck in those loops of not having those real conversation, those real connection, and being prey to just another click, just another scroll. Oh, maybe I will have this thing that I want. It'll make my day a bit lighter or better. And then I forgot how to read and how to climb trees, right?
Yeah. So a quick question for you, Christian. With that data you read, when you said Brazil is the most, is that a specific platform? Is that Instagram usage? Is it smartphone use? What?
The average screen time exceeds 9 hours.
Screen time. Okay.
Yeah. And then children are, joining the digital world before they read. So that's kind of like, something that happens in Brazil. We talked about reading. Like, you are on the screen before you learn how to read. Therefore, why would you learn how to read when there's a more fun stuff that you cannot bother to learn how to read, right? So maybe the Portuguese language is in peril, guys. So we have to be careful.
But it almost sounds like Meta. Meta is very deep in the AI arms race right now, Meta Labs, and it seems from what you're saying, Sanjay, that they can't afford to lose the kids, because the kids actually constitute a large percentage of their revenue, or the engagement itself that translates into. I know the kids aren't necessarily on there to be targeted with, I don't know, toys or whatever kids buy, but that the engagement and that data that's collected on them is so valuable that Meta can't afford to lose that and if they do, then they risk losing a large share of their revenue model. And if they lose a large share of their revenue model, then they're not competing with the giants like Google or Anthropic, the other AI giants. And then they risk losing the arm race. And we know that Zuckerberg has voiced he's even shown it, right, with how much he's paying to poach these AI engineers from other companies, how much he really wants to win this AI race. So the kids, right, might represent a very important, valuable part of the equation for him to be able to do that. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And, Mark, Bill Gates, they never gave their children smartphones. Do you know this?
Yeah. No, they're the smartest guys. They don't give their own kids smartphones. They know what it does.
Bill Gates, I know for a fact, because we know where his children went to school at. They were the most anti-tech children coming up. So they know.
Yeah.
So to your point, yes, for Meta, it's a double whammy, right? So it's like you lose current revenue, you lose the potential to learn from them and tune your AI engine for future. And what you learn from teens, you also end up applying to adults, right? I mean, these behaviors translate because the human mind works in a certain way, and that's what they're learning. So the second issue is that it takes away all of the AI learning potential. And the third one is, of course, these same users, when they become adults, they are addicted by then, and hence it's a guaranteed revenue stream.
Thanks. I wanted to take a quick second. If the audience is watching live in all our social media platform, yes, we are on Facebook, on X, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. All the people we're talking about that can use social media, hopefully for good. I hope this is useful, everyone that's watching. If you have any questions or comments, now could be a time for the Q&A. So please ask any questions or comment on the chat. And, going back to some of the statistics I found for this episode, we talked about 99.1% in South Korea. There's better countries like Norway. So Norway talks about 58% of 9 years old are on phones or social media, and 72% of 11 years old. So that's much better than South Korea. But is it acceptable? It's still 58% at 9 years old and 72% at 11 years old, right? So this is better, but I think, we have a long way to go.
We have a long way to go. I think the attention span issue that you were talking about, Mark, earlier you said, people cannot get through a movie. I read this article in the Atlantic that movie graduate programs in cinema making, their students are not able to sit through a movie. It's gone that, it's like absurdity, right?
Yeah, maybe like TikTok shorts are going to be winning Oscars in the future.
They are becoming like goldfish, right? 14 seconds of attention span. So yeah, I mean, we're in a terrible place. The only way out is above. I remain optimistic. I think between the, even your product that you're talking about, the way to essentially limit the damage for the ones who are already in the ecosystem or the ones who are about to be there, maybe, you delay it. The whole question is delaying until they are ready. It's not very different from alcohol. Alcohol consumption by itself is not an issue. You just have to do it at the point where you're responsible.
Because at that age, you're still developing, your brain, and neurodevelopmentally, you're more vulnerable, right? Right. And that rewires your brain in a real way that can have lasting impact. We talked also about cannabis before the age of not even 18, but 21 or 25. Cannabis is legal in Canada, by the way. That's where I am. I'm not pro or against it. I'm just saying that there's some neurological consequences of exposing a growing brain. My brain is still hopefully growing, but I'm past 25, so maybe I can be on social media now. Not sure. Maybe not too often.
Beware.
So we had a comment from the chat. Just wanted to read for the audience. So we just had a nice comment saying this was a very useful podcast. Thanks for doing this. That is Mina. Thank you, Mina, for tuning in and for your comment. If you have other comments or questions, we're here to discuss this. This is on purpose live to make this available, accessible to people who want to have this discussion, who want to build community, who wants to get in touch with people that care. And Sanjay is definitely one of those persons. So that's why we have him here today. Mark, he cares a little bit less, but we still love him. So what are the kind of impacts that we're envisioning for, Mark talked about what happened. Like, by the way, South Korea, we talked about, I forgot to mention that South Korea passed a new law in that just came effect this month, March 2026, trying to do some legal assistance to this problem. Sanjay talked about the UK. We talked about Australia. Here I'm in Montreal, Quebec. So since last September, there's phone-free schools in the whole province. Other provinces in Canada have not adopted that. Some states have, some schools specifically. But we just talked about that phone-free schools is not enough, and banning for 16 is not enough. So what's the next steps after? Like, okay, we have the awareness, people are talking about it. What can we envision to go even further?
And we have a question here. Do you want to take the audience one? And then
thank you for this engaging discussion. I was wondering what your take is on the internet being a free source of information and as a source of social and cultural capital for population that have historically not had access. Take, for example, even
a discussion like this one.
I can start with that. I am very conscious that the quality of information is not reflected by the quantity of information. So, it's great that people have the access to tools like the internet, Google, and now, various chat bots or engines integrated in almost every browser. And so you can get a lot of information. And I think that's a net positive for the world. I think what we need to realize and teach and coach people, especially youth, is that you cannot, ask whatever AI you want to use. Can you do my homework, or can you get that information? And that's done, right? And adults do that too. It's not just children, right? To kind of explain that in a metaphor, I like to explain to people that, you can have a lot of food. Now we live in a place, yes, there is probably some places in India that still lack electricity, still a bit of poverty. In some places in Africa and in developed world too, even here in Montreal, there's some homelessness. But most people can have some food. But now most nations or developed nation have too much food. And so the question is now, are you going to go eat McDonald's every day? Or are you going to eat less and have a good quality, meat or non-meat, veg? And what's the diet? Is it going to be sugar, right? So the quality quantity of your food will be the quality of your health. So the quality of your information will be the quality of your mental health. A lot of content and information is not information. It is either propaganda. It is also probably tied to money, right? So is it media or social media that gives click? Then we're going to show more of that type of media and call it information. So if you really want to have good information, now you do have access to it everywhere in the world. Most people have access to internet. That's great. But we still need to teach people that it doesn't take, a TikTok video or a short to understand a subject. You have to probably look at different sources, different videos, talk to your friends about it, have their opinion, have a group chat, have a real life conversation, go dig yourself. I have paper, I took notes, I read books. Like, this is the type of information that elevates a discussion. But just because you have internet doesn't mean you have information. This is my take on it.
I think the comment on the social and culture capital, this being an aspirational place for people who don't, I was mentioning this earlier, it seems to be a thing that helps you leapfrog. There is some truth to that. And I think the answer, at least in my understanding, is, again, to your point, right? It's like, which is the wholesome portion of it and which is the junk, right? So it's just the signal from the noise, right? I don't think we are saying that everything that happens on the internet and all of the progress that we have seen so far was wrong. I think the question is, so it's about education. So along with that leapfrog in capital, maybe there's also guardrails on that leapfrog. So more education, more understanding, modulo the age at which anyone across social classes is ready for the content. Below 14, doesn't matter what class, the device is not a good place. That's kind of I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So Mark, you were saying.
I think 14 is being generated. I think 16, if not 17 or 18 is appropriate age. And I think one aspect that we didn't touch upon is, the social contagion component of all of this, right? Sanjay, you're familiar with the phrase, you are what you eat, right? But you are what you consume in terms of information, attention. The people that you grow up around, they have a strong impact on who you become as a person. And during COVID, we were forced into isolation, right? Involuntarily, but by default, we were interacting with our phones, devices, and that became our environment, right? Which exposed us to a multitude of information and ideas from people online. But this is where the phrase influencer comes from. It's meant to influence other people and try to incentivize them to take some sort of action, i.e., purchase the product, convert, do what I would like you to do. Not manipulation, but it is a form of influence. So young children, their brains are just much more malleable. They're much more influenceable. I don't know if that's a word, by these types of social media marketing, right? But it's not even social media marketing, it's ideas. And this is the point that I was trying to make before, which is, I think it's great, right, that everybody has access to free information on the internet, but it's not the accurate. I would say accuracy is not necessarily correlated with the rate of information spreading, right? These platforms, they don't choose necessarily for accurate information, like, let's promote the more accurate information, that's going to spread faster. It's actually the information or the content that's going to trigger the more emotional basal ganglia part of our brain that or the amygdala gets enraged. That's what's going to spread faster, regardless of whether it is accurate or not, right? That's the information that spreads the fastest. When you combine that with a child brain, it produces a result that can be very unpredictable. We don't know. There's trends that you see in the US, the ideas about how kids identify themselves at a very young age. I don't want to get too political here, but the whole entire, gender dysmorphia discussion about identifying whether when you're a little boy, if you're actually a girl or not. And this whole idea comes about because of social contagion, right? And this trend actually is seen much more in coastal cities, right? Less so in underdeveloped areas, because it's highly correlated with social media usage. It's how much time that you spend online and the people that you follow, and they have an influence on you. So the social contagion aspect of all this cannot be understated.
Thanks for that. And we are living in a social world. We've always lived in a social world, and we've always been influenced, but now we're being influenced by people across the world and that look trustworthy or that are popular or viral. But that does not mean that information is better. And sometimes it's better to have no information than bad information or misinformation, right? I'll tell you that it's better to say, I don't know, then, I think I know, and then it's wrong, or it's serving someone else's purposes, and you think it's your own because you got that information, you incorporate it as your value, and then you're probably polarized because that's what social media does. You're either right or wrong, black or white, and there's no kind of gray discussion, and trying to figure out what are the nuance of this information, and looking at different sides. I did want to go back to what you two were saying, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I think that 14 years old or 16 years old is not really the solution, right? So it's helpful, as Sanjay said, to kind of help and give guidelines, right? But I'm going to give you in the audience another concrete example. I live in Canada, and Mark is in Europe, and we talked about prohibition. The drinking age in the US is 21, right? So if you've traveled in Europe and you've seen, Americans go on a pub crawl, they don't know how to drink. Am I wrong, Mark?
No clue. Yeah.
Okay. And why is that? Because the prohibition is too long, right? And no one told them how to drink, right? So you see Canadians, you see Europeans, they're probably okay. Americans, they go crazy, right? Spring break, you all seen that. We're in colleges when they have the chance for alcohol, then they lose everything, right? So think about this with social media. If you've prohibited that, and then you finally give them a phone at 16 or 14, and you never taught them how to use it, they're going to go wild on the internet, right? My approach is more to say, okay, it's not about the absolute age limit. It's about parents mostly, but it can be coaches, it can be school teacher, it can be workshops. There are many ways to do it. It's to explain to them how to use those devices so that they don't go wild. It's explain to them what's good information, and the parents don't do this enough. It's not about giving your child or not the phone. I used to go on the internet with my teenage boy and look together some information and show him and look together. Hey, you want to learn about the subject? Let's look at the information. Is that good? Do we double check, right? And then you teach them how to use the internet responsibly and to get the information that's not junk. And that's what we're missing in the gap. It's not just the don't do this or this age. It's like teaching the next generation how to use the tool that it is, not to get trapped and they become the tool.
I think as with all things in life, it's going to be the sum of all of these solutions, right? It's going to be the combination, right? Society needs to wake up to the fact that this is not a screen time problem. This is not a simple distraction problem or another teenage rebellion in the home problem. This is a deeper problem, right? I think that's the first order of business. Second one is, as you were saying, it cannot be very, very hard. We have to use the it's not a hammer for every hammer for everything looks like a nail, right? It's not that. So whether it's 60, which is one of the reasons we debate this a lot. Should we just go for it and then, push the limit to 18? And the general sentiment is this. So the consensus that's emerging based on a lot of psychological studies that have already been done is that it is those ages. You can argue whether it's 14, 16, etc. But the reality is that it's approximately in that range, right? Because other things are happening developmentally to the child as well, including coming of age and, all of that. This thing around social media probably influencing, ideas around gender and so on and so forth. I beg to differ. I think it creates echo chambers. So there are echo chambers which are what we would consider, hyper woke or just woke. And there are echo chambers which are hyper conservative. And all of a sudden, like anybody who's not practicing or reciting a certain thing or doing the rosary are evil. So, it just polarizes. I think you said this earlier. It just polarizes. So I would say, I would put it on that. Social media also helps to disseminate information and inform, right? And that's where that line is emerging. Like, where do you keep it to informed from not random influencers whose motives are to make money off of you, but truly go to sources which are wholesome, right? And I'm hoping that the solution that you guys are coming up with is the thing that directs people, new users towards that safer portion of the internet, so that other things like, this class distinction or this social capital can continue to be built, right? But in a safer way. The only problem is the device is a personal device. That's the issue. It's not a shared device, right? So once it's personal, it's mine. And any question, any intervention on how I am using my device becomes a thing of violation. You're violating their rights. That's where the compassion comes in. Like, how does a parent go to the child and say, I understand that, in order to be, because they get ostracized. Imagine if you pull out 5 children children and 40 others are on the device, they are the ones to get targeted. There's bullying. You don't need to be on the social media to get bullied, because they come to the school and they've already chatted on WhatsApp, and these are real examples. So children come in and all of a sudden there's the whole whisper thing going on against the ones who are not, right? And that's where the nuance comes in. So I think it's a combination of all of these, right? How do you use it safely? But the thing has to slow down. It has to slow down enough that we come to grips with what we are dealing with, right? I mean, this fellow is like, we are about to reach consciousness, and this, like, enough. Like, stop, right? We don't know. Maybe it's maybe we reached consciousness. Like, seriously, what are you talking about?
No, I think we're our company, our AWE, stands for Awareness, Wellness, and Enjoyment, and we're talking about awareness because we don't think that there's enough awareness and consciousness. We're trying, and it's everyone and every community to try to raise awareness, to have those discussions, and to keep in that nuance, right? It's not black or white, not polarized. We're just trying to find solutions, and we can be wrong. And we are wrong, and we can do better, right? And always kind of try to figure out better ways. I wanted to get back to the very important point you mentioned, right? Personal device, right? The smarter phone is in your pocket. It has your kind of identity. You have your social media that are kind of proxy and avatar of you in the world. You can get likes or dislikes and comments on that, right? So people are getting their identity based on that. And, coming back to kind of my point, my suggestion is that when you have more communal use of technology, then you can start to de-identify yourself from the device, right? It's like, we're going to use the internet together or the smartphone together to do something as a family, as a community, right? Like, now we're using the internet together to do something with 3 people to discuss. That's a good use of technology, right? When it's like Chris is looking at stuff, Sanjay is looking at stuff, and Mark alone and doing their stuff, that's not useful, right? And I think we should start to kind of create those ideas that we can use technology more than one person at a time. We can say, hey, we're, like you remember a few years ago, people starting to have conversation with their friends, and then as they're debating, let's Google it, right? So people don't want to be in certainty. They're like, no, I'm going to find it right now. It's like, no, we don't need to Google it. We don't need the exact information. Or if we do, it's a consensus, and we're like, okay, this important information, none of us 3 knows it. So maybe we can actually try to find a source and verify and okay. But now it's like, no, we need to find everything now and be right. And is the first Google response right? Again, do we know or not? Is it on Wikipedia? Is it proper? You probably don't have the time to figure that out. But if you do that as a kind of family, and you kind of create those rules and those opportunities to say, hey, we're going to actually watch a 2-hour movie together as a family. Okay, that is possible, right? So you're kind of using the screen as something that you do together, and you're using the internet as not just someone going on social media and being stuck in the loop and being polarized with their preferences that are going to be, like you mentioned, echo chambers of right, left, this or that. You're going to create a more conversation about what you can learn about, right? So, I just watched this 8-minute video. What do you think about it, Mark? Right? Bringing conversation about it. Being, okay, I saw something like this, and let's watch this other thing together because this subject seems interesting, right? So I think having those conversations, even if we're not reading books, but we're using technology and social media, is already an enriched way of using social media.
Yeah, I agree.
Just, to get you to speak a little bit about the audience, we missed you on the burnout podcast that we did with some information, but I would still love to hear a little bit more about burnout at 40s. You want to share a few minutes to the audience? What was your story? Like, we're talking about exhaustion, about parents, about work, about execs, about tech. Can you share a bit the story of what happened and what you've learned from it?
You're switching topics here. Fair enough. More here and now, and I'm not an influencer. I'm not interested in getting your eyeballs or making money off of you. I think what Chris is referring to is, when we were chatting about this particular conversation, we also had a few other ideas we were knocking about. And one of them was my own personal story around, back when I was in Google, I had already been in the tech industry for almost, I would say 25 years, maybe 20 years, 25 years, breakneck pace of targets and OKRs, politics, lots and lots of big amounts of money. Like at one point, I was myself accountable for upwards of $1 billion of revenue for cloud at Microsoft. And, you go into office in the morning, not knowing why you're going and not really looking forward to the day. There comes a stage that in hindsight, that was a burnout stage. You drive back. I would drive back not feeling good about the day and actually feeling deeply, deeply guilty about kind of how much money I was making. And I was like, my goodness, I didn't earn those dollars, did I? So sadness. And then it creeps up on you, and at some point it just like explodes. So I went into clinical depression, and I would say, the darkest time of my life. It's a really, really sad place to be. And when I hear about mental health issues, connecting to the previous topic, mental health issues, anything that's accelerating it for anyone, that's like criminal.
Yeah.
I mean, right? That's like you're peddling not just drugs, you're peddling like the next level that definitely gets them addicted and gone. Social media is doing that to our children. They are becoming lonelier. They are becoming more and more isolated. They're becoming more polarized in their thinking, and they are becoming sad. They are very sad inside. They are scared. So I was like that. I know what that looks like. Very dark place. And people come and say, oh, you need to be stronger. But I'm thinking, hang on a second. I am strong, right? I chose not to end it all. I am choosing to stay with the problem. But then you take stock of your life. You move a step back from. So I took some time off and I said, hey, I need to clear my head. And suddenly the pattern started to emerge. It's like, this job that I'm doing, am I really in it for the right reasons? I was a big title. It doesn't matter what the title was. And, very, very heady position, senior most in Southeast Asia at Google, and a lot riding on me, but not enough support in the system, etc., right? So I'm just like, I'm not even happy. Why am I doing this? I was doing this because it was cool to do it, because it was difficult to step down from there, because it felt like failure. I had never failed before that, right? But then, life is much more than that. So you take some time off, you look at it from far away. And long story short, went through, the proper treatment for all of depression. I had a psychiatrist, beautiful human being. Really, my family, my wife especially, you need family. That's when you realize, oh my goodness, all of these people matter. And then suddenly it's just like, why am I even doing this? I'm not even happy. I don't really care what they call me. I just want to sleep at night. I just want to sleep reliably every night. So I bailed from that job. Very, very difficult decision. Came back to the last known good position at Microsoft. Beautiful 7-8 years with a lot more clarity on what gave me joy. So point is, it happens to the best of us. The ones that look very glamorous from far away are probably the saddest ones. And some take charge of their destiny and go the way I did. Some others don't. Some others just fizzle out. Some others take their lives. Like many things happen. If you choose to stick with it, and then tremendous learning happens. So I don't even know, maybe I should just say this. I have decided to become a high school teacher, middle school teacher. I don't know which grade they're going to assign me, but that's just as of 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go teach, and I want to teach children, be with them, around them, hopefully be a role model for them. Maybe that's what happiness was all along. I don't know. I'll find out.
So touched and happy to hear that. Congratulations. And, it is unfortunately probably one of the still least paid position in most countries, being a teacher. But, we know that this is the most important thing. We're working with schools, we're working with teachers, and the influence that you can have for a few kids, generations of people to give them a different way of thinking. And sometimes you have to work in the system, and sometimes you have to push the system to looking at how education systems normally decrease creativity in children. There's a lot to do in many of those systems, but it takes courageous teachers that are doing it for the passion, and that are also willing to tell, the sometimes school system, districts, governments, and administration, there's a better way to teach, and we're here to really make the children flourish and not perish and be just another number in the school. So I'm really happy to hear that, Sanjay, and that you'll be making a difference. That made my day.
Thank you. Lovely to have this conversation with you. Thank you for having me.
Likewise. If the audience has a few more questions, we will probably be closing in 5 minutes. Thank you all again for attending. Sanjay, if we want to reach you or have more information about your organization, I would like to be in your class if you want to teach me, but I think I'm a bit too old. We'll figure that out. But tell us where people can find you online.
Yeah, we have a website, smartphonefreechildhoodindia.org. I'm obviously on LinkedIn. That's how you found me. You can post my email address as a follow-up to this podcast. Yeah, I'm there. And there's a way to connect back with us on the website. You can also join our WhatsApp community, the India community. It's still early days. We are trying to do a few pilots in 6 or 7 schools in a couple of cities. Slow going, slow moving. It's a difficult topic.
We support your work and your community, and Awe Digital Wellness is willing to partner with you or any other, similar organization. Please let us know how we can contribute. I also was looking a bit about India in terms of phone use. I can see there's kind of a big disparity between urban and rural areas in phone use. Do you want to talk a bit about that and what are some of the challenges and opportunities for that?
Yeah, so the urban is very similar to urban India behaves very similar to Canada, Australia. Like India is very rich in places where the top part. So we have a little America, 300 million perfectly fine, happy, rich people.
I've been to Mumbai. There's some that are definitely richer than me in Mumbai. Yes.
Absolutely. But then there's the other part, the other 70% of the population, which is rural. And that's that conversation that we were having in the context of a question earlier as well around social class, right? So rural India from internet penetration is really high because the telecom penetration has essentially just covered most of the smaller towns and the hinterland. A lot of the consumption is via video. TikTok is banned in India. So it's generally YouTube videos, Insta, Facebook, the highest user base by far of Facebook in India. We have the population for that as well. And YouTube. YouTube's largest user base is in India. There are multilingual AI models being developed like as if there was no tomorrow, because the learning, guess what? The learning breaks down. If you learn in English and try to implement it and, furnish answers in a different language, in Gujarati or in Hindi or, Punjabi, etc., it fades, the models fail. So they need learning in the native language. So a lot of voice-oriented inputs as well, because these are not literate in the sense of being able to type. So they speak. Give me a video, in their language. Give me a video that shows me how to cook, this kind of, chicken vindaloo, right? So and then out pops another video. So it's all voice and video. And the algorithms are learning, and they're trying to do a lot of mapping of Indic languages on the back end. There's also a defense angle. People think of AI and burgeoning technologies as safety in this world. So if Palantir and OpenAI are helping, the US do whatever it is doing right now, India clears and wants to build up defenses. So it's like the new nuclear arms regime, all in a new genie, that bottle. So that's kind of the lay of the land. The very deep penetration, mostly voice and video. Local languages emerging very rapidly. The average Indian is very, very, very savvy with technology. Average Indian. Yeah. So things like payment systems, things like WhatsApp, very, very deep penetration.
And there's more than 50 languages, if I remember, in India, right?
And if you look at the primary ones, around 25 odd, there's a lot of diversity. It's a big country. So 25 languages across the board, which they are trying to map in a hurry so that they can learn. It's all that data that's getting wasted now because they're receiving it in a language that is not easily learnable.
I'm glad that there still are some languages that are maybe less trackable by Big Brother. We know what some of the issues that Anthropic was not wanting to have the U.S. government spy on a citizen or on other citizens with voice, with video, with credit card, with geolocation. All those technology are, as the comment and we talked about, amazing to have this information and ability to connect across the world. We're in 3 different continents now, having a beautiful conversation, yet there is some clear danger that we can, talk about and try to mitigate by having those conversations. And thank you again, Sanjay, for making those actions real, having this conversation. I've learned from you, and I'm happy about your personal situation and advancement. And I hope that we get to have more of those talks on a podcast or offline. Please keep in touch, Sanjay. Any closing word, Sanjay? Did you enjoy the conversation?
I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I'm really happy we are having this conversation, honestly. I think it's a here and now, and clearly, even the 3 of us are not on the same page. That's the difficulty of it. We are all in this field. We are concerned citizens. We are concerned parents in some cases. We are concerned educators. We cannot get on the same page. How can you imagine a 12-year-old to make sense of this? Yeah. We've exceeded our responsibility to the next generation. Just dumped it on them. It's about time we did our jobs.
Thanks again, Sanjay. Thanks again, the audience, also for joining in. If you're joining live or later, please watch comments. Please watch the next episode and put some comments. Our next episode is on Friday. The next stream is Make ADHD Your Genius, Neurodivergence as Leadership Advantage with Tracy Goodman. This is March 13th. At 12 p.m. noon EST. Thanks again, Sanjay and Mark. Any last word?
Thank you so much, Sanjay, for joining us. It's been super insightful, and I love hearing about your journey and self-discovery, and I really wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Best of luck.
Sanjay.
Thanks for having me, Chris. And Mark, lovely conversation. Lovely.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Likewise. All right.
My
Take care. Bye.
Guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week for more awe and awesome conversations. Make sure to follow us and comment on your thoughts on this week's topic. I'm your happiness expert and co-host, Christian Dominic. Please find and reach out to us directly and visit our website at awedigitalwellness.com. See you next time. Thanks for your curiosity. Looking forward to your comments, and keep on smiling.